Okay, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Joel, and every week we have teaching from the Bible. We normally do that by going through a book in the Bible for a series of weeks, and we've been doing the book of Nehemiah for the last few months. We're in chapter 13 today, getting very near the end. I'm going to read the first 14 verses. It says this: On that day they read from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and in it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God. For they did not meet the people of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. Yet our God turned the curse into a blessing. As soon as the people heard the law, they separated from Israel all those of foreign descent. Now before this, Eliashib, the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God and who was related to Tobiah, prepared for Tobiah a large chamber where they had previously put the grain offering, the frankincense, the vessels, and the tithes of grain, wine, and oil, which were given by commandment to the Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, and the contributions for the priests. While this was taking place, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I went to the king. And after some time, I asked leave of the king and came to Jerusalem, and I then discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah, preparing for him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And I was very angry, and I threw all the household furniture of Tobiah out of the chamber. Then I gave orders, and they cleansed the chambers, and I brought back there the vessels of the house of God with the grain offering and the frankincense. I also found out that the portions of the Levites had not been given to them, so that the Levites and the singers who did the work had fled, each to his field. So I confronted the officials and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set them in their stations. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain, wine, and oil into the storehouses. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouses Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah of the Levites, and as their assistant, Hanan the son of Zakkur, son of Mattaniah, for they were considered reliable, and their duty was to distribute to their brothers. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for his service. So if you're new here, that's a confusing story I read to you just now. I understand if you feel a little confused, a little bit in the dark as to the names I've read and the references, the places, and so on. A bit of background to help. This is the story of a brave group of people led by a remarkable, courageous, creative leader called Nehemiah, who were in the business of setting up their home city all over again. Jerusalem was a special city. It was a city God had chosen to be in with his people like no other city on planet Earth. It was God's capital city. It was where God dwelt, where God hung out, where God wanted to be with people. And yet it had been ransacked and sieged and destroyed because of the long-term disobedience of God's people. They'd rejected God. They'd flirted with other gods. They'd basically thrown off God and run the other way. They totally ignored him. And God dealt with them by sending them out, but we're in the part of the story where they're gradually coming back into their land, coming back into the city and reestablishing it. And over the last 12 chapters, we've been learning about how the walls have been rebuilt, worship has been restored, and all kinds of institutions, all kinds of aspects of Israel culture, Jewish culture, have been recovered so that the people feel we're back. We are back where we were. We've restored what was lost. We've become what we were always supposed to be. We're friends with God again. We found out our true identity. And it's been good. In spite of the difficulty and the problems and the challenges, they've got through all of them and they've proved their faithfulness and they're with God. Now, in this part of the story that I just read, Nehemiah gets called back to the court of the king of Persia, Artaxerxes. Don't forget, he's always been a servant of that pagan king all along. While he's gone, the mice have played, all right? While Nehemiah has been out of the picture, people have lost it again. They've kind of forgotten the story. They've lost the plot. And they've ended up drifting in pretty much the same ways that they had drifted before. They've fallen, not necessarily because they've woke up one morning and said, I know, let's ignore God all over again. Let's go crazy. Let's break as many commandments as we can in one day. Let's do it. It wasn't like that. It was more of a drift. It's what happens when you get apathy. You see, generally speaking, people tend to drift. By default, we drift through life. If you make no decisions, you're making a decision. If you make no decisions about strengthening your marriage, or strengthening your work, strengthening your studies, if you make no decisions about persevering and pursuing a goal and making sure you get it, you have made a decision. The decision you've made is apathy. And these guys are drifting. They've fallen back. They've really missed the mark. And Nehemiah comes in and he gets a little bit furious. He goes Jack Bauer on them. He starts to get a bit physical. He takes furniture. He throws it out. He starts to throw his weight around. It's like, Mourinho is back. It's that kind of moment. And not that the people of God should ever be compared to Chelsea, but you get my point. There's this kind of, okay, the guy's back. The guy's back. Who knows what's going to happen? And he's not pleased. He's back, and he means business. And he wants to set some things straight immediately. And we need to just back up to understand why he's so cross, okay? I think for many of us, it was, the guy just needs to chill. He's obviously worked up. He's not on his meds. He's just lost it slightly. He needs to get back into a calm diet, and maybe everything. And maybe there's some personality clash between him and Tobiah. They obviously don't get on. And maybe a person could read this, and maybe read the whole book of Nehemiah, in fact, and if they're being undiscerning, if they're being a bit dull-witted, they would perhaps see this as, well, they never got on, these two. Nehemiah's come back to the temple, and they've set Tobiah up in the temple, right? The temple is God's special place, and it's a sacred place. It's a worship place. They're supposed to be priests and Levites conducting rituals of worship. There's supposed to be all this kind of religious stuff going on there. It's the Hebrew gods kind of place. And, this guy Tobiah, nice guy, he's set himself up a kind of penthouse suite in there. And, he's brought his furniture in. He's thrown out some of the grain and the frankincense. And so he's got to make space for furniture. He's got an aquarium and a big wide screen. And he needs the space. So come on, it's a bit unreasonable to get so upset about this. And maybe the Levites have had to move out. Maybe the priests have had to go. But, maybe they wanted to go. Tobiah needs his space. It's his bachelor pad. He needs some room there. And there's this kind of potential misunderstanding we could creep into where we think, well, these guys, there's a personality clash, and they've had a bad history, Tobiah and Nehemiah. I want to just tell you that would be missing the point, because this is not a personality clash, right? Nehemiah, he knows how to handle personality clashes. He's a big guy, right? He's a big leader. He knows how to lead thousands of people. He knows if it was just a personality problem, Nehemiah would get over it. He's good at that. But that's not the issue at stake. He's pointing out something more severe than that. Go with me to verse 11 where he kind of puts it in clear terms. He says, I confronted the officials and said, why is the house of God forsaken? Now that ought to have touched a nerve. If you've been with us the last few weeks, that phrase might resonate because it actually comes up similarly in chapter 10, just a page back, where the whole group, the whole community, the whole city comes out for a big public meeting. They start making big vows. They say, we're going to keep our covenant with God. This is our commitment to God. These are things we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. We're going to do these things for God. And it's all very big, very kind of Russell Crowe voice kind of stuff. And, we will do this. And this whole chapter of we wills. And then you get to end of verse 39. It says, we will not neglect the house of our God. And then literally a page over, he's having to say to them, why is the house of God forsaken? In a matter of, I guess, a few years at the most, they've done the very thing they said they'd never do. And that ought to wake us up. Because these people meant business when they said what they said. They weren't flaky. when they made that commitment. They'd been through a lot. They'd worked hard. They'd suffered. They'd prevailed. They were serious people. And then they made a commitment that they didn't keep. And I read that, I think, God, help me. Help me. Because I've made some commitments with my life. I made one publicly nearly 15 years ago with hundreds of people watching. I said to one lady, I said, I'll never leave you. I said, forsaking all others, I bind myself to you. For richer, for poorer, for better or worse. I'm burning my bridges. It's you. You're the one. I'm not looking at other options now. Did it publicly. And you might say, well, good, well done. You're thrilled because you're a preacher, so presumably that's easy for you. That's what people like you do that every day, right? You make vows and keep them brilliantly because you're a professional. These people look pretty professional when they made theirs. They threw it in badly. I tell you, we need to be real. We need to look at these things and realize that the heart can drift. We can fall into apathy. We can fall into distraction. We can blow it. We can let things into our lives that should never have had a place. And one of the ways that God will help you is he'll put Nehemiahs in your face. You'll say, God, help me to keep my marriage vows. And the way God does it is he puts an incredibly annoying person in your life who asks you every 6 months, how's it going then? How's your marriage? And then once when you let slip that your marriage isn't perfect, he asks you every month. And then you say, it's not going that well this month. He asks you every week. You think, leave me alone. Don't you trust me? Well, not really, no. I should have, trusted these people, but perhaps Nehemiah is necessary. In every situation, we need one another. We need this abiding brother or sister who pokes their face in and asks and talks and says, look, you've made a covenant. You promised. This is big. This isn't small. This is before God. Thank God for people in my life who are doing that for me. You need them too, right? And let's not miss the profound nature of what is at stake here. This is the presence of God. This is the temple, all right? I said earlier, God's capital city. If there was a place within the city that was the holiest place, the sacred place, the concentrate, like where the magnifying glass beams down and burns holes. It was the temple. This sacred spot on planet Earth. And they'd recovered it. They restored worship. They set the priesthood up. They were doing the sacrificial system. We've done it. We're back to what we should have been from the beginning. At last, by God's mercy and grace, everything that was lost because of our stupidity has been recovered. We are back with God. What have you done while I've been away? You've let this Tobiah in to put his penthouse in the temple. Tobiah's not a worshiper of God. I mean, we know no worshiper of God would have allowed the priests and the Levites to leave, to go. They're off. There's no space for us. We're out. They left. They've discovered. They feel intimidated by this rather big personality that Tobiah must have been. Such foolishness. We let these things. And let me just apply this to you, because obviously, if you read the story, read the Bible from cover to cover, you'll understand that the temple in Jerusalem, it's not the way that we now worship God. The temple was a kind of a shadow, a foreshadow of the global temple, the international temple. Because now if you want to meet God, you don't have to go to a certain building made of stone in the Middle East. The New Testament talks about a temple not built with hands, made of living stones, made of people. God's plan from the beginning was to have a dwelling place not made of rock, a dwelling place made of guys like you and me. He wants to dwell within us. He wants to live in our hearts. He wants to inhabit the sacred places of our lives, the secret places. He wants to be the center of our motives, our desires, our dreams and visions, our hopes, our longings. You are created as a creature of desire. Have you noticed that? You around long enough, you realize, I've got these longings, and I always want. I just long for, I can't quite understand. If it's not this, it's that, but there's always something I crave and require of life. There's a demand deep within me that can't be stopped. It's like a thirst that can't be quenched. It rages. I must. And we seek to find it fulfilled through various things, through pleasurable escapes, sexual experiences, multiple relationships, drug experiences, financial acquisition, approval, the approval of our peers. Wow, to have people that we respect, respecting us. That's big, isn't it? Isn't it? The thing where the person you really, really look up to respects you. Wow. I don't know about you. For me, that's one of the big ones. Just this, there are things that maybe you're wired differently. You require comfort. You just crave comfort. You crave a sense of just distance between you and the problems and difficulties and efforts. I just want comfort. I want pleasure. I want security. I want approval. I don't know what it will be, but listen, guys, we're wired to desire. My problem is that we've deliberately refused to desire the one person who can fulfill those desires. From the beginning, from conception, we have refused him. The Bible talks about it happening in the very beginning of time, when mankind was first put on planet Earth. We rejected our heart's desire, the one we were made for. And then we walk through life wondering why we're so restless, wondering why we're so dissatisfied, wondering why we're not at home in the world. We can't have what we long for, and the things we have we don't really want. And those things that we do think we want, they're like the kind of end of the rainbow. You might even get them in a way, but when you get them, you find they're not the thing you wanted after all. They're not. It's not. This isn't it. There's something more. There's some longing. The Bible calls that the heart. That's the word the Bible has for it, the heart. And you've got to look at this story about a building in Jerusalem with that in mind, okay? The temple here is an image of your heart. That's designed, created, set up like a temple. It's established, it's built solidly for the presence and the devotion to a certain person. That's what it's for. And when that person isn't at the heart, when our desires and longings are conducted in another direction, we're kind of all out of whack. It doesn't work. Life doesn't make any sense at all. And like these people, we seem to make a habit of welcoming in the wrong things. So this man is welcomed in Tobiah. He should have known better. I mean, by the time Nehemiah gets there, there's brutal activism required. He's got to throw furniture on the pavement. That's not. Pastors don't. I haven't ever done that. All right. It's not comfortable. It's not harmony, and sometimes in life, quite radical disruption is needed to wake us up. To shock us back to our senses. Maybe for somebody here today, that's exactly how it feels. You feel, maybe you're watching this at Racecourse or Shoreham or Hove, you're watching this and you're feeling the same, or someone here, you're aware that you're listening to a message that's kind of shaking you up. And you were expecting it to be just comfortable, convenient, pleasant, preachers, pastors, they're generally nice guys who just kind of conduct a little service and pat us on the back and tell us we're wonderful and let us go. But I tell you, you need more than that. We all do. We need God to wake us up because our tendency is to drift into false worship and to allow the temple of our heart to be inhabited by false gods, to be inhabited by Tobiahs that set up their home as if it belongs to them, as if it's always been their home. And we're so naive. We let wolves in. And we say, what big teeth you have, Grandma? What interesting ideas you have. What fascinating concepts you have that really resonate with the postmodern culture of our times, Grandma. Instead of reflecting, thinking, wait a minute, is this going to help me to get to know God? Is this going to help me to learn more about the person who made me? Is this going to bring me into reality, or is it going to distract me and take me down a dangerous rabbit hole, which I never come out of? We need God. We need help. We need people like Nehemiah. We need this radical treatment. So Nehemiah comes in and says, why have you done this? I mean, I can imagine the guys in Jerusalem saying, what are we supposed to do? Throw Tobiah out? And Nehemiah's like, watch me. You know, yes, that's exactly. Have you noticed when you let the wrong things into your life, they settle in. They settle in and they treat your life as if it belongs to them. No one ever goes to a bookkeeper's and thinks, I'm just going to ruin my life today. I really feel like it. I feel like throwing all my budget plans out the window. I just feel like ruining the next 10 years and ruining the lives of all those who depend on me financially. I really want to do that. You go in looking for an inch or giving an inch, and you lose a mile. You go in and say, I'm just going to dip my toe, I'm just going to try this, I'm going to just have a taste of this. But the problem with the taster is it grabs you because it wants you, because it consumes you. Your heart is a lovely target for false Tobiahs. There is this thing in the Bible called evil that wants control of you. There's only one person who should have that kind of control, except he never calls it control in the same way. He calls it love. But there's someone who's a usurper. There's someone who's a false god who truly wants control of you. He'll give you nothing back. He won't make you into his son or daughter. He'll make you into his slave. And he'll have you. Because you say, oh, let's just try this out. Yeah, come in, just have a look around. I'm sure the day they let Tobiah in, they just said, yeah, just have a look around the temple. And months later, his furniture is there. He's established. He is at home. Thank you. And thank you for covering the mortgage. Thank you for having the car place outside. Thank you. It's lovely. Everything's good. The lights, everything. I love the decor. I love it's good. What we've been reading, living, etc. I love this place. Thank you for just making me feel so at home in your heart. But as soon as you question, as soon as you say, okay, I think we need to move on. How dare you? I own you. That's how it happens. So people, when you sit down with someone sometimes who's struggling, their marriage is in a bit of a mess, or their finances, or I don't know, some aspect of life that's got way out of control. And they want some help. So you sit down and you ask a heart question. You say, well, if you want God to be back at the center of your heart, it's going to mean change. It's going to mean rejection. It's going to mean turning your back on some things. And what sometimes comes back at me when I press those buttons is, what, do you expect me to do that? Do you expect me to finish that relationship? Do you expect me to stop that habit? Do you expect me to stop looking at those? Do you expect me to stop clicking on those sites? How can be real? How is that ever going to change? No way can you ask me to do that. That's the wrong question. Surely the question should be, why did you ever let one foot in the door from that person? Why are they even in the room? Why did that relationship even start? Why did that habit get the space it didn't deserve? Why did you give it any oxygen? How did you allow this to happen? But we tend to think the problem is, how dare you want to change me, God? And God's saying, no, you don't understand. You walked away from me. God's so merciful. He'll prod, he'll poke, he'll want, because his desire is to have our heart and to refresh us and to give us the true good news, the true gospel. Because what a Tobiah will tend to do, the way that he will get into your heart, the way that evil things that control us get in, is by offering good things. They offer us a false gospel, a false good news. Follow me, give your life to me, and I will make you feel so secure. Give your life to me, and I will make you feel so pleasured. Give your life to me, and you will be so respected by your friends. If you have this thing, if you have that, if you pursue this, if you take this from me, I've got loads to spare, have more. And it feels so winsome. And it's a gospel, it's a message of good news. That's what gospel means. It's good news, but it's false good news. It's a fraud. It's a counterfeit gospel. There's only one true gospel. It's the good news that Jesus came offering. It's the good news that this book teaches us about, that there's a God who requires our worship, but in order for us not to become his slaves, but to become his sons, his daughters, to be liberated. So Nehemiah sees the issue for what it is, and he takes action. Let me just quickly run through what he does, because it's worth making a point here and there. The first thing that I notice about what he does here is he doesn't waste time. It's very easy to put things off. Maybe today you're thinking, you know what, I think you're right. I think you're talking about me. Maybe I've mentioned some activity that you're involved with and you just know, oh man, how did you know that about me? And listen, if that's true about you, then please be encouraged. Because the worst thing that could happen to you is you just sit there and it just bounces off. You're not even aware. You don't even want to want God in your heart. You don't even want your heart purified. You don't. It's like I don't want God and I don't want to want God. I find that in my heart, I sometimes don't want God, but I want to want him. Do you know what I mean? It's like I kind of, okay, I'm not wanting you enough. Help me to desire you. Restore my desires. Wake up my longings for you again. But if your heart is saying, I don't even want to want God, well, that's more serious. But if you're saying, look, I do want him, and this is troubling me, and you're putting your finger on me, and ouch, and I want help, and what do I do? Listen, if that's the case with you, be encouraged. Take heart. Be filled with hope. Because God wouldn't be giving you that feeling if there wasn't hope for you. He's giving that to you by his Holy Spirit. He's drawing some of you even for the first time here today. He's saying, I want your heart because I love you. So he wastes no time. He doesn't say, I'm going to leave it till tomorrow. Oh, yeah, this is an important message. Yeah, I think this sermon has got some points to make, but obviously, everything needs to be reflected on. We don't want to get carried away. We don't want to take things too seriously. Nehemiah doesn't do that. He wastes no time. Time wasting when it comes to God is foolishness. The second thing I notice is that he doesn't dialogue with people about this. He doesn't say, well, let's have a constructive discussion about the points of view around this. There are some things you can have a discussion about, but when it comes to obeying God or not obeying God, there's no discussion. Discussion is fruitless, distracting, silly. Don't have a discussion. Don't weigh it up with, let's just talk it through. Act. Be obedient. The third thing is that he fears no censure. He's making some very deliberate calls here. He's throwing furniture out. He's eyeballing people. He's getting in some faces. It's making him very unpopular. I'm sure they're thinking, oh man, Nehemiah is back. We were so enjoying it when he was back in Persia. Who is this? We were kind of looking forward to seeing him. The Skype calls were kind of nice, and it was nice from a distance. But now he's here. He's throwing his weight. We don't like this. It's easy to be put off obeying when you know it's going to make you unpopular with people, isn't it? I can obey God a lot better if I know that I'm the only person affected. But when I know a decision that I have to make is going to leave other people feeling upset, put out, let down, disappointed, I'm a coward. I don't want to do it. And I think of reasons not to do it. And I pretend that they're spiritual reasons. I say, no, well, I think I should protect these people. I should protect this person, make sure they're all right. And God's saying, I can protect them a lot better than you can. So he fears no censure, he gets on. And then fourthly, he gets physical. I mean, towards the end of the chapter, he gets very physical. Well, that's for another Sunday. Come back if you want to hear about that. He's going to get, he has to. He can't just do it with words now. It's like, okay, some things have got to change, some things have got to get thrown out. I tell you, there are times in the Christian life where the only way forward is to throw things out. Physically, I mean, literally, stuff. I did that when I was 17 years old. I threw a load of stuff out. I had some stuff. And it wasn't like, some of you think, why did you throw that out? It's just like books by Dickens. Or, albums by Led Zeppelin. Just stuff that was kind of, it's like music. And listen, it wasn't because it was evil, even Led Zeppelin, all right? It wasn't, all right? It was because for me, that had become my thing to the point where I didn't want God. I wanted worldly idea. I wanted literature. I wanted to be seen as something. I was pursuing a dream for my life, arty kind of dream for my life that was much bigger than God. And the reason I didn't want God was because he was a threat to my preferred dream. And I knew that one of the best things for me to do was just going to get rid of some stuff. Some of it I literally threw away because it was bad. Some of it I just gave away. I just took it to shop. I just thought, I'm going to get free from this. You might need to do something. You might need to literally throw some stuff out because it is bad. It's just junk. You've got some porn or something, or maybe you just need to throw your modem away. You need to think ruthlessly. You need to be brutal. You say, look, is it important that I have God in the temple of my life, or isn't it? If it is, then guys, be like Nehemiah. Some of us, you just need to get baptized. It's physical. Oh, no, I don't need to do anything. I believe it. I believe in Jesus. I don't need to go down in the water. That's just over the top. That's just for intense people. Well, I'm one of the intense people then. We're all intense people. That's what I'm trying to say. We're all cauldrons of desire. And either Jesus meant it when he said be baptized, or he didn't. Being baptized is our way of saying, Jesus, I mean it when I say that I've died to my old life and I'm being raised to a new life in you. If that's not happened to you, you need to be baptized in water by going under it and coming out again, like they did in the Bible. So he gets physical, he follows it through. I don't know what the thing that you need to do is, but he's leaving us a good example here. Whatever it is, do what it says in Colossians chapter 3, where Paul puts it in very clear terms. He says, put to death what is earthly in you. Sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these things, the wrath of God is coming. Put it to death. If you belong to Jesus, put it to death. Don't let it rule you. Don't let it kill you. It will consume you. You let it inside, it will take over. It will set up its home. Put it to death. Put it to death. You notice how passionate he is? Because he knows the stakes, right? He knows the issues are real. You ever watched 24? You know kind of what I mean. A new series is coming out soon, so I can refer to it. You know when Jack Bauer just goes Jack Bauer? When he does that thing where everyone in the room is like, is this guy for real? Why did you just shoot someone in the knee? We were having lunch. What's going on? What? And then after you shot them, instead of saying, oh, I'm terribly sorry, you went, where's the president? No! You got a problem. What is your problem? What is your problem, Jack Bauer? You got a problem. Go and see someone. You need some therapy. Jack Bauer's the only one who doesn't have a problem. He's the only one who knows what's going on. He's the only one who knows there's a bomb on a plane, or there's a terrorist in a queue, or there's a lunatic with a fridge. I don't know. He is in the zone. He knows what's going on. Everyone else is just carrying on with their day. Ignorant, dull, lied to, deceived, fooled. People who know the stakes will come off as intense sometimes. Nehemiah knew the stakes. This is the temple. It's God's house. What have you done? This is why we got thrown out of Jerusalem for this stuff. Some of you, you've got terrible problems in your life because you've been worshiping false gods that have taken you to the cleaners for years. And you're saying, God, could you help me? Help me out. You haven't understood the intensity. You haven't understood the fact that your life is messed up, the fact you've got these habits you can't break, these problems you can't solve, these towering giants that you can't overcome. It's because you gave your heart away years ago. You don't need a sticky plaster. You need Nehemiah. You need someone intense. Because you're intense. Because your heart worships something. You long for things, and you haven't longed for Jesus. We need Nehemiah, but I tell you, we need someone even better. We need the better Nehemiah. Because Nehemiah is just a kind of pointer, right? Nehemiah, he's a shadow. He's an example. He points to the greater Nehemiah. There was another man who came to this same place about 450 years later. And they drifted again. People tend to drift over 450 years. And this time they weren't letting just lunatics come in and set up their furniture. They had a market stall in the temple. They had all kinds of stuff going on so that they were buying and selling and making money and making the poor spend extra money so they get to worship God. They were charging people who were poor, who couldn't, to worship God. They were pushing themselves. They were trying to set up their own kingdom in the temple. This other man, he came in and he says he made a whip out of some cords he found in the temple. And he went around this market stall, which was probably about the size of a shopping mall. And he turned over the tables. He pushed away the cages where they were selling the pigeons. He kicked out the animals. I don't know if he hit anybody, but he made a whip, so I don't know what he did with it. He was angry. Because he gets angry, Jesus does. If your Jesus never gets angry, you got the wrong one. His friend met him years and years later. The man who wrote that story. Do you know, this guy who wrote the story, John, his friend John, he said he and his friends got together. They watched Jesus turning this shopping mall into chaos. And people were like, what is this lunatic? What's he doing? And they gathered around. They said, John chapter 2, it says, they said to each other, zeal for your house consumes me. Consumes me. Isn't that an interesting word? Listen, guys, something will consume you. Something will. You might think, no, nothing consumes me. I consume myself. Well, good luck. Because what you're doing is you're conning yourself. Guys, we will be consumed by the spirit of our age, by the desires of the times, by the things that control us. Something will consume you. There was this man, Jesus, who was so consumed with passion for God's glory that he went mental in a shopping mall and turned everybody out. He dealt with it. He dealt with it passionately, with great passion. He said, I'm not going to have this, because he understood the stakes. You know, have you ever watched those nature programs where it shows a cuckoo laying its egg in a like a reed warbler's nest? I've seen this happen. You've seen it on TV. They lay an egg. They can't be bothered to raise their own kids, so they put an egg in another bird's nest, and it hatches before the other birds hatch, and it takes over the nest. And the mother, the reed warbler, comes back and says, "Oh, it's a bit early, but I'll feed it anyway." It's got the same kind of call as the reed warbler. So it starts feeding this cuckoo. And within a few days, it still hasn't twigged. It doesn't ask the question, like, why is my baby 14 times the size of the nest? Why is my baby 12 times the size of me? What's going on? Keeps feeding it, carries on feeding it. The other eggs get pushed out, just like the Levites and the priests. Push them out. That's what happens with sin. That's what happens. He takes over the nest, takes over control. Jesus said, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. This is my Father's house. Get this out, get this out, get this out. Listen to me. The only hope for you and change in your life is the fact that Jesus is so passionate. And not only did he clear a temple, but he himself took all of our compromise, all of our drifting, all of our wickedness, all of our selfishness, all of our idolatry, all of our stupidity. He carried it up a hill and he got crucified for it. That's why we call it Passion Week. Jesus was passionate, so passionate. He didn't just clear a temple, he died for you. He died for you. He's that passionate for you. He died so you could be pure. You think, oh, God sounds very violent. Jesus, even Jesus, I'm a bit shocked, this violent Jesus. I tell you what, it was nothing compared to the violence he received himself. He received it. He died. He breathed his last. He was smitten. He was crushed. He was beaten. He was crucified and killed so that you could be free. So that you don't have to think, how am I going to change? What, I've got to become more like Jack Bauer? Is that I've got to become really passionate? It won't work. Promise you, I've tried it. It won't work. It won't work. You can't make yourself some incredible kind of sin-defeating renegade. I take them out like Jack takes out terrorists. I'm just so hard. It won't work. There's only one who's that powerful. There's only one. That you get to know him, you look into his fiery eyes, you understand his majesty, you get shocked by his passion for you. You do it when we sing, when we stand up in a moment and sing. You don't just say, I think this is a bit where we sing songs, right? This is your moment to get free. Focus, let your faith grow. Meditate on his bigness, his greatness, his majesty, his passion, his zeal. It will change you. It will stir you. It will help you to purify your heart and have a new temple. A new place set up within you, which he alone resides in, because he alone deserves to.